In the heart of Europe, the city of Plzeň, known for its rich history and industrial prowess, found itself under Nazi occupation by 1939. This city, famous for its Pilsner beer and the Škoda Works, one of the largest industrial complexes in Czechoslovakia, had become a crucial component of the German war machine. The once vibrant streets, filled with the sounds of laughter and commerce, were now dominated by the oppressive presence of German soldiers and an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. As German forces tightened their grip on Czechoslovakia, the daily lives of its citizens transformed dramatically. The factories that had once symbolized national pride were repurposed to manufacture weapons and machinery for the Nazi regime. The clang of metal and the whir of machinery were now accompanied by the somber realization that they were contributing to a war that sought to obliterate their very identity. Workers at Škoda and Seat, the two industrial giants of Plzeň, toiled under the watchful eyes of their occupiers, their spirits crushed by the weight of oppression. In the early months of occupation, disbelief among the workers was palpable. The rapid and brutal annexation of Czechoslovakia left many in shock, grappling with the harsh realities of life under Nazi rule. The German authorities imposed strict regulations, enforcing curfews and rationing essential goods. The Gestapo, the feared secret police, patrolled the streets, instilling a sense of dread that permeated every aspect of daily life. Conversations in factory break rooms were hushed, filled with a mix of resignation and fear. The idea of resistance seemed distant as the workers confronted the grim reality of starvation and deprivation. Families struggled to survive as the German occupiers prioritized their own needs, leaving the Czech population to face the brunt of scarcity. Food shortages became increasingly severe, and the sight of malnourished children and desperate mothers haunted the workers' daily lives. The oppressive atmosphere stifled any hope of rebellion, yet beneath the surface, a flicker of discontent began to ignite. The clerks and accountants, accustomed to the meticulous world of numbers and ledgers, started to recognize their potential for subversion. They understood that the German occupiers relied heavily on the efficiency and accuracy of their financial systems to maintain control. If these systems could be manipulated, perhaps they could divert resources to those in desperate need. As 1939 drew to a close, the atmosphere within the factories began to shift. The clerks and accountants formerly resigned to their fate had contemplated the unthinkable. The initial disbelief that had paralyzed them was slowly being replaced by a burgeoning resolve to resist. The resistance prepared for a daring plan that would challenge the very foundations of Nazi control in Plzeň. The workers, once passive victims of occupation, began to envision themselves as agents of change, ready to take risks for the sake of their families and communities. The Nazi occupation of Czechoslovakia began in March 1939, following the Munich Agreement, which allowed Hitler to annex the Sudetenland. This betrayal by Western powers left the nation vulnerable, and within months, the rest of the country fell under German control. Plzeň, strategically located near the border with Germany, became a focal point for Nazi industrial efforts. The Škoda Works, renowned for its production of artillery, tanks, and other military equipment, was transformed into a critical asset for the German war effort. The daily life of Plzeň citizens was marked by a stark contrast between bustling industrial activity and a pervasive atmosphere of fear. The factories, once symbols of national pride and economic strength, became sites of oppression. Workers faced long hours, grueling conditions, and the constant threat of violence from their occupiers. The German authorities imposed strict quotas on production, demanding unwavering compliance from the Czech workforce. Failure to meet these quotas could result in severe punishment, including imprisonment or execution. When the war progressed, the situation for ordinary Czechs grew increasingly dire. Rationing became the norm, with food, clothing, and other essentials in short supply. The German authorities prioritized their own needs, leaving the local population to fend for themselves. The black market flourished as desperate families sought to obtain basic necessities. The sight of empty shelves in stores and the growing number of malnourished children painted a grim picture of life under occupation. Amidst this backdrop of despair, the idea of resistance began to take root. The clerks and accountants at Škoda and Works, who had initially felt powerless, started to recognize their unique position within the Nazi financial system. They understood that the occupiers relied on accurate payroll and production records to maintain control over the workforce. By manipulating these records, they could divert funds and resources to support their families and the underground resistance movement. In clandestine meetings held in the dimly lit corners of factory break rooms and private homes, these workers began to devise a plan. They knew that any form of dissent carried significant risks, but the desperation of their fellow citizens fueled their determination. The clerks began to inflate paysheets, create fictitious employees, and misreport production quotas. These falsifications would allow him to siphon off money and rations, redirecting them to those who needed them most. The logistics of their resistance efforts were complex. The clerks formed small, secretive networks within the factories, operating under a veil of secrecy. Trust was paramount, as the risk of discovery by the Gestapo was ever present. Each member of the network had a specific role, whether it was gathering information, creating false documents, or distributing the diverted resources. The clerks had to remain vigilant, constantly adapting their tactics to avoid detection. They communicated in code and used clandestine methods to transport the resources they gathered. As 1941 approached, the clerks' resolve began to solidify. The initial disbelief that had gripped them was slowly giving way to a sense of purpose. They understood that their actions could make a tangible difference in the lives of those around them. The prospect of alleviating the suffering of their families and neighbors became a powerful motivator, pushing them to take risks they had never considered before. The resistance prepared for a bold scheme that would challenge the very foundations of Nazi control in Plzeň. The clerks and accountants, once passive victims of occupation, were now ready to take a stand. They were determined to fight back against the oppressive regime that sought to strip them of their dignity and humanity. The seeds of resistance had been sown, and the workers of Plzeň were prepared to embark on a journey that would test their courage and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. As 1942 unfolded, the atmosphere within the factories of Škoda and Works grew increasingly charged with a sense of purpose and urgency. The clerks and accountants, emboldened by their earlier discussions, were now fully committed to executing their audacious plan to manipulate the Nazi payroll system. This was no longer a mere idea whispered in the shadows. It had transformed into a calculated operation aimed at undermining the occupiers while providing for their suffering compatriots. The clerks began by meticulously crafting fictitious employees, each with a backstory that could withstand scrutiny. They invented names, addresses, and even fabricated work histories, ensuring that these ghostly figures appeared legitimate on paper. Each entry was a small act of rebellion, a way to reclaim agency in a world dominated by fear and oppression. The clerks understood that the success of their scheme hinged on their ability to maintain the facade of normalcy, and they approached their tasks with a mix of trepidation and determination. In addition to creating false identities, the clerks manipulated production quotas to justify the inflated payroll. By reporting higher output than was actually achieved, they could rationalize the increased wages they were siphoning off. This required not only a keen understanding of the factory's operations but also a careful orchestration of lies that could withstand the scrutiny of the German authorities. They worked late into the night, poring over ledgers and spreadsheets, ensuring that every detail was accounted for and that their deception remained undetected. The clerks operated in small, tightly knit groups, each member entrusted with specific tasks. This division of labor was crucial. It minimized the risk of exposure and allowed them to work more efficiently. Trust became the cornerstone of their operation, as they relied on one another to keep the scheme under wraps. They communicated through coded messages and discreet meetings, always aware that the Gestapo's watchful eyes could be lurking just around the corner. During the scheme began to take shape, the clerks felt a profound sense of camaraderie. They were no longer just factory workers. They were part of a movement, a collective effort to resist the Nazi regime. The knowledge that their actions could make a tangible difference in the lives of their families and neighbors fueled their resolve. Each successful transaction, each falsified document, was a small victory against the oppressors who had turned their lives upside down. However, the constant threat of discovery loomed large. The Gestapo's presence was a chilling reminder of the risks they faced. The clerks knew that if their scheme were uncovered, the consequences would be dire not only for them but for their families and colleagues as well. The fear of betrayal hung over them, and they were acutely aware that a single misstep could unravel everything they had worked for. Despite the dangers, the clerks pressed on. They understood that their actions were not just about survival. They were about reclaiming their dignity and humanity in the face of oppression. The thought of their families suffering from hunger and deprivation motivated them to take risks that they might have otherwise avoided. They were driven by a sense of moral obligation, a belief that they could not stand idly by while their fellow citizens endured unimaginable hardship. As the months passed, the clerks began to see the fruits of their labor. The funds they diverted from the Nazi payroll were used to support families in need, providing much-needed relief from the hardships of occupation. Rations that had once been scarce began to trickle into the homes of those who had been most affected by the war. The sight of children with full bellies and families sharing meals once again became a source of hope in a bleak landscape. The underground resistance movement, bolstered by the additional resources, began to expand its operations. With the funds they received, resistance cells could procure weapons, print anti-Nazi pamphlets, and support acts of sabotage against the occupiers. The clerks had unwittingly become a vital part of a larger network of defiance, their actions fueling a broader campaign against the Nazi regime. However, as the clerks celebrated their successes, they also faced new challenges. The Nazi authorities, increasingly aware of the discrepancies in the payroll records, began to scrutinize the financial operations of Škoda and Works more closely. Whispers of audits and investigations circulated among the workers, casting a pall of anxiety over the factories. The clerks knew that increased scrutiny could spell disaster for their operation, and they were forced to adapt their tactics to avoid detection. The tension within the factories was palpable. Workers exchanged nervous glances as they went about their daily tasks, acutely aware that the Gestapo could strike at any moment. The clerks, while committed to their mission, felt the weight of fear pressing down on them. They had come too far to turn back, but the risks were mounting, and the stakes had never been higher. As 1942 drew to a close, the clerks stood at a crossroads. Their confrontation with fear and authority had reached a critical juncture. They had successfully diverted funds and resources to support the resistance, but the threat of discovery loomed ever larger. The clerks knew that they were playing a dangerous game, but they were unwilling to abandon their mission. They had taken a stand against oppression, and they were prepared to face the consequences, whatever they may be. By 1943, the clandestine efforts of the clerks at Škoda and Works had begun to yield significant results. The audacious scheme to manipulate payroll records was no longer just a daring act of defiance. It had become a lifeline for countless families suffering under the oppressive Nazi regime. While the war raged on, the clerks' covert operations grew increasingly sophisticated, enabling them to channel more resources into the hands of those who needed them most. The impact of their actions was profound and far-reaching. In the small, dimly lit apartments of Plzeň, families who had once faced the grim specter of starvation now found themselves with enough to eat. The extra rations and funds siphoned from the occupiers' coffers were a godsend. Bread, butter, and meat, once luxuries that had become scarce under the Nazi rationing system, began to appear on tables once again. For many, these small victories were a beacon of hope in a world overshadowed by despair. The clerks' efforts also significantly bolstered the underground resistance movement. With the additional resources, resistance cells could procure weapons, print anti-Nazi pamphlets, and support acts of sabotage against the occupiers. The clerks had unwittingly become a crucial part of the machinery of resistance, their actions fueling a broader campaign against the Nazis. They were no longer just clerks, they were part of a larger movement, a collective effort to reclaim their homeland from the grip of tyranny. However, success brought with it new challenges. The growing effectiveness of their scheme did not go unnoticed. The Nazi authorities, ever vigilant for signs of dissent, began to take note of the discrepancies in the factory records. Whispers of audits and investigations began to circulate among the workers, casting a pall of anxiety over the factories. The clerks knew that increased scrutiny could spell disaster, but they remained undeterred. Their commitment to the cause outweighed the risks, driving them to continue their audacious efforts. As the clerks navigated this precarious landscape, they found themselves grappling with the duality of their existence. On one hand, they were ordinary workers, going about their daily tasks under the watchful eyes of their occupiers. On the other hand, they were agents of change, wielding the power of numbers and deception to challenge the status quo. This duality fueled a sense of purpose, a belief that they were part of something greater than themselves. The clerks also experienced a profound sense of camaraderie. They shared not only the burden of their secret but also the joy of their successes. Each time they managed to divert funds or provide for a struggling family, it reinforced their bond and commitment to one another. They became a tight-knit community, united by their shared mission and the understanding that they were risking everything for the sake of their fellow citizens. As the year progressed, the clerks began to witness the tangible results of their efforts. Families who had once been on the brink of starvation now had enough to eat. Children who had gone to bed hungry were now able to enjoy a warm meal, and parents could provide for their loved ones in ways they had thought impossible. The sight of children playing, laughing, and sharing meals became a powerful symbol of resilience in the face of adversity. The clerks also received feedback from the underground resistance movement, which expressed gratitude for the support they were providing. This acknowledgement fueled their resolve, reinforcing the belief that their actions were making a real difference. The sense of purpose that had initially motivated them now blossomed into a deep-seated commitment to the cause of resistance. They understood that they were part of a larger struggle, one that transcended their individual fears and sacrifices. Yet, as the clerks celebrated their successes, they remained acutely aware of the risks they faced. The audits and investigations that loomed on the horizon were a constant source of anxiety. They knew that the Nazi authorities were becoming increasingly suspicious, and the threat of exposure was ever present. The clerks had to remain vigilant, constantly adapting their tactics to avoid detection while continuing to support their fellow citizens. Despite the growing danger, the clerks remained resolute. They understood the stakes and were prepared to face the consequences of their actions. For them, the fight against the Nazis was not just a matter of survival, it was a moral imperative. They drew strength from the knowledge that their efforts were making a tangible difference, that they were part of something larger than themselves. By the end of that year, the clerks continued to walk a tightrope, balancing their daring acts of defiance against the ever-present danger of discovery. The tension within the factories was palpable, a constant reminder of the precariousness of their situation. Yet, amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was also a sense of camaraderie and purpose, a shared determination to resist the occupiers at all costs. The clerks' actions had set in motion a chain of events that would have far-reaching consequences, both for themselves and for the broader resistance movement. As they looked to the future, they knew that their fight was far from over, but they also knew that they were not alone. In the face of tyranny, they had found strength in unity. As 1944 unfolded, the atmosphere within the factories of Škoda and Czechoslovakia grew increasingly fraught with tension. The clerks faced the grim reality of their actions coming to light. The Nazi authorities, having sensed the undercurrents of dissent, intensified their scrutiny of financial records, launching a series of audits that threatened to expose the clerks' audacious scheme. The audits were not merely bureaucratic exercises, they were a calculated effort to root out resistance. German auditors, with their sharp eyes and cold demeanor, descended upon the factories, meticulously combing through the ledgers and payroll records. The clerks, who had previously felt empowered by their ability to subvert the occupiers, found themselves ensnared in a web of fear and anxiety. Each day brought the possibility of discovery, and with it, the specter of arrest, imprisonment, or even execution. In the face of this mounting pressure, the clerks grappled with profound moral dilemmas. They had embarked on their mission to alleviate suffering, to provide for their families, and to strike a blow against the Nazi regime. Yet, as the audits progressed, they were forced to confront the potential consequences of their actions. What if their efforts led to the arrest of their colleagues? What if innocent lives were caught in the crossfire of their defiance? The weight of these questions bore heavily on their consciences, creating a rift between their noble intentions and the harsh realities of their situation. Despite the fear that gripped them, the clerks remained resolute. They had witnessed the tangible impact of their actions: the families who had received food and resources, the resistance cells that had been bolstered by their contributions. The knowledge that they were part of something larger than themselves fueled their determination to continue, even as the walls began to close in around them. As the audits continued, the clerks employed increasingly sophisticated tactics to cover their tracks. They created false documentation, fabricated employee histories, and devised elaborate schemes to mask the discrepancies in the records. Each day became a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, with the clerks navigating the treacherous waters of deception while trying to maintain the facade of normalcy in the factories. The tension reached a boiling point when one of the clerks, a young accountant named Jan, was summoned for questioning by the Gestapo. The news spread quickly through the factory, igniting a sense of panic among the workers. Jan had been one of the key figures in the scheme, and his potential exposure sent shockwaves through the ranks of the clerks. The fear of betrayal loomed large, and whispers of suspicion began to circulate. Who could be trusted? Who might turn informant to save themselves? In the days that followed, the clerks convened secret meetings, their faces etched with worry. They discussed contingency plans, weighing the risks of continuing their operations against the potential fallout. Some argued for a retreat, suggesting that they abandon their efforts to protect themselves and their families. Others, however, were adamant that they could not turn back now. The stakes were too high, and the suffering of their fellow citizens was too great. As the situation escalated, the clerks faced a critical turning point. They had to decide whether to double down on their efforts or to cut their losses and retreat into silence. The moral implications of their actions weighed heavily on them, as they grappled with the reality that their resistance could lead to dire consequences not just for themselves, but for the entire community they sought to protect. Ultimately, the clerks chose to press on. They understood that their actions had already made a difference, and to abandon their mission now would be to forsake the very people they had sought to help. The decision was not made lightly, and it came with a heavy burden of responsibility. They knew that they were walking a tightrope, but the thought of their families suffering in silence was unbearable. As the year progressed, the audits intensified, and the clerks found themselves caught in a relentless cycle of fear and defiance. The Gestapo's presence loomed larger, and the atmosphere within the factories became increasingly charged. Workers exchanged nervous glances, and conversations that had once been filled with camaraderie were now tinged with anxiety. The clerks' resolve was tested time and again, but they remained committed to their cause. They continued to siphon off funds and resources, even as the risk of discovery escalated. Their actions became a form of silent protest, a refusal to submit to the oppressive regime that sought to crush their spirit. As 1944 drew to a close, the consequences of their actions began to crystallize. The clerks had become symbols of resistance, their efforts inspiring others to stand up against the occupiers. Yet, the threat of exposure loomed larger than ever, and the clerks knew that the reckoning was approaching. They had fought valiantly, but the price of their defiance was yet to be determined. The year of World War II in 1945 marked a profound transformation for the clerks at Škoda and Works. As the Nazi regime crumbled, the Clerks emerged from the shadows, their actions now a testament to the power of resistance and the resilience of the human spirit. The aftermath of the war brought with it a mixture of relief, sorrow, and reflection as the Clerks grappled with the consequences of their choices. In the immediate aftermath of the war, the Clerks were hailed as unsung heroes. Their efforts to manipulate the Nazi payroll system had not only provided vital support to families in need but had also played a crucial role in sustaining the underground resistance movement. The impact of their actions reverberated throughout the community, as the resources they had diverted helped to fuel acts of defiance against the occupiers. Yet, as the initial euphoria of liberation began to fade, the Clerks were confronted with the weight of their actions. The moral dilemmas they had faced during the audits now loomed large in their minds. They had risked everything to fight against tyranny, but at what cost? The fear of betrayal and the potential consequences of their actions had created a rift between their noble intentions and the harsh realities of the war. As they navigated the complexities of post-war life, the Clerks found themselves grappling with a range of emotions. There was joy in their liberation, but also sorrow for the lives lost and the suffering endured during the occupation. Many of the families they had sought to help had faced unimaginable hardships, and the Clerks were acutely aware of the sacrifices made by their fellow citizens. In the months that followed, the Clerks began to reflect on their legacy. They understood that their actions had not only provided immediate relief but had also fostered a spirit of solidarity and resistance among the workers. The bonds forged during the clandestine efforts had created a sense of community that transcended the fear and oppression of the occupation. As Czechoslovakia began to rebuild in the aftermath of the war, the Clerks' story became part of the larger narrative of resistance. Their actions were commemorated in local histories and memorials, serving as a reminder of the courage and ingenuity that had sustained the nation during its darkest hours. The Clerks were invited to speak at community gatherings, sharing their experiences and inspiring others to stand up against oppression. However, the transition to peace was not without its challenges. The Clerks faced the daunting task of reconciling their past with the present. They had operated in secrecy, driven by a sense of urgency and purpose, but now they were called to be open about their actions. The fear of retribution from former collaborators and the complexities of navigating a post-war society weighed heavily on their minds. In this new landscape, the Clerks found themselves at a crossroads. They could choose to remain silent, to bury their past in the shadows, or they could embrace their role as advocates for justice and reconciliation. Many chose the latter, recognizing that their experiences could serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up for what is right. As they shared their stories, the Clerks became symbols of hope and resilience. Their actions had demonstrated the power of ordinary individuals to effect change in the face of overwhelming odds. They had fought not only for their families but for the ideals of freedom and justice that resonated deeply within the hearts of their fellow citizens. In the years that followed, the Clerks' legacy continued to inspire future generations. Their story became a part of the national consciousness, a reminder of the enduring spirit of resistance against tyranny. As Czechoslovakia rebuilt, the Clerks' actions served as a guiding light, illustrating the importance of solidarity and collective action in the face of adversity. As they looked to the future, the Clerks did so with a sense of pride and accomplishment. They had fought for their families, their communities, and their country, and in doing so, they had helped to shape the course of history. Their actions had left an indelible mark on the world, a testament to the enduring power of resistance and the importance of hope in the face of tyranny. In the Clerks at Škoda and Works emerged not only as survivors but as champions of a cause greater than themselves. Their story is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, and that the spirit of resistance can never be extinguished. In the years following the of World War II, the account of the Clerks at Škoda and Works became a symbol of resistance and resilience in Czechoslovakia. While many of the individuals involved remained anonymous, their actions were recognized as a critical part of the larger narrative of Czech defiance against Nazi oppression. The legacy of their ingenuity and courage was commemorated in local histories and memorials, serving as a reminder of the power of ordinary people to effect change in the face of overwhelming odds. As the dust of war settled, the nation began to grapple with the profound changes wrought by the conflict. Czechoslovakia, emerging from the ashes of occupation, sought to rebuild not only its infrastructure but also its collective identity. The account of the Clerks became intertwined with the national narrative, symbolizing the spirit of resistance that had sustained the populace through years of hardship. In the immediate post-war years, the Clerks' actions were celebrated in various forms. Local newspapers published articles recounting their bravery, and community gatherings were held to honor their contributions. Schools incorporated lessons about the resistance into their curricula, ensuring that future generations would understand the sacrifices made by those who dared to defy tyranny. The Clerks became a part of the folklore of the nation, their story a source of pride and inspiration. One of the most significant commemorative efforts was the establishment of memorials dedicated to the resistance movement. In Plzeň, where the Clerks had operated in secrecy, a monument was erected to honor the unsung heroes of the factories. The monument, adorned with inscriptions detailing the bravery of those who had fought against oppression, became a place of pilgrimage for families and descendants of the resistance fighters. Each year, on the anniversary of the liberation, citizens gathered at the monument to pay their respects, lighting candles and laying flowers in memory of those who had sacrificed so much. The enduring legacy of the Clerks extended beyond mere remembrance. It became a catalyst for discussions about moral courage and civic responsibility. As Czechoslovakia navigated the complexities of post-war governance, the account of the Clerks served as a reminder of the importance of standing up for justice and the rights of the oppressed. In a time when the nation was redefining itself, the Clerks' actions inspired a renewed commitment to democratic values and human rights. In the decades that followed, the Clerks' story was passed down through generations, a testament to the power of collective action and the importance of standing up for what is right. Their actions had not only provided a lifeline to countless families during the war but had also inspired a spirit of solidarity and defiance that would endure long after the conflict had ended. As Czechoslovakia rebuilt in the aftermath of the war, the Clerks' legacy served as a guiding light, a reminder of the resilience and determination that had sustained the nation during its darkest hours. Their story became a part of the national consciousness, a symbol of hope and resistance that would continue to inspire future generations. In the 1960s, as Czechoslovakia experienced a period of political liberalization known as the Prague Spring, the Clerks' legacy took on new significance. The ideals of freedom and democracy that emerged during this time resonated with the spirit of resistance embodied by the Clerks. Their story was invoked by activists and intellectuals advocating for reform, illustrating the enduring relevance of their actions in the face of oppression. However, the Prague Spring was met with a brutal crackdown by the Soviet-led Warsaw Pact forces in 1968, leading to a period of normalization that stifled dissent. Yet, the memory of the Clerks persisted, serving as a quiet reminder of the power of resistance even in the face of overwhelming force. The narrative of the Clerks became a source of inspiration for dissidents and activists who continued to fight for freedom and human rights in the decades that followed. As Czechoslovakia transitioned from a communist regime to a democratic society in the late 1980s, the enduring legacy of the Clerks was once again brought to the forefront. The Velvet Revolution of 1989, which saw the peaceful overthrow of the communist government, was fueled by a collective desire for freedom and justice. The Clerks' story, emblematic of the struggle against tyranny, resonated deeply with the citizens who took to the streets to demand change. In the years following the Velvet Revolution, the Clerks' legacy was celebrated in a new light. Their actions were recognized not only as a part of the resistance against Nazi occupation but also as a precursor to the broader fight for democracy and human rights in Czechoslovakia. The Clerks became symbols of the enduring spirit of resistance that had characterized the nation throughout its tumultuous history. The commemoration of the Clerks' legacy extended beyond national borders. In the context of European history, their story became a part of the larger narrative of resistance against totalitarianism. The Clerks were included in discussions about civil disobedience and moral courage, serving as examples for those fighting against oppression in various forms around the world. Their actions were cited in academic studies, documentaries, and public lectures, highlighting the universal themes of courage, sacrifice, and the power of ordinary individuals to effect change. As the 21st century unfolded, the enduring legacy of the Clerks continued to inspire new generations. In an age marked by globalization and the rise of authoritarianism in various parts of the world, their story served as a reminder of the importance of civic engagement and the need to stand up against injustice. Educational initiatives focused on teaching the history of resistance movements included the Clerks' actions as a case study, emphasizing the role of ordinary people in shaping the course of history. The Clerks' legacy also found expression in the arts. Plays, films, and literature inspired by their story emerged, capturing the essence of their struggle and the moral dilemmas they faced. These artistic interpretations not only honored the Clerks' contributions but also sparked conversations about the nature of resistance and the responsibilities of individuals in the face of oppression. In recent years, as Czechoslovakia has evolved into the Czech Republic and Slovakia, the enduring legacy of the Clerks remains a vital part of the national identity. Their story is woven into the fabric of the nation, a testament to the resilience and courage of those who dared to defy tyranny. The Clerks are remembered not just as individuals but as representatives of a collective spirit that transcends time and place. As we reflect on the enduring legacy of the Clerks at Škoda and Works, we honor their courage, their ingenuity, and their unwavering commitment to the fight against tyranny. Their story is a testament to the enduring power of resistance and the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. In a world still grappling with the shadows of oppression, the Clerks' legacy serves as a beacon of hope, reminding us that even in the darkest of times, there is always the possibility of change. Their actions remind us that resistance is not merely an act of defiance but a moral imperative. The Clerks, through their courage and ingenuity, have left an indelible mark on history, inspiring generations to come to stand up against injustice and fight for a better world. As we remember the unsung heroes of Škoda and Works, we carry forward their legacy, ensuring that their story continues to resonate in the hearts and minds of those who believe in the power of hope, unity, and the enduring spirit of resistance.